Good afternoon and good evening, fellow squids. Today, I am pleased to be back here in front of you guys for another great set of content. Today, we have Twmattt from the Tapioca DAO protocol. And before we get started, Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for having me. Likewise, it's very nice again to meet you guys and to be here.
I know, right? It's definitely crazy to after like a year in Discord of like passing each other by to finally get on stream. So super excited to have you here and super excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, no, likewise. I'm very pumped. I was actually going to say the same thing. Been bumping into both you guys in Discord and obviously I know you Garrett on Twitter. So very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, awesome. So I think we have a lot of stuff to talk about, including some news that you guys just announced, as well as like some very interesting stuff that's coming up this week. But before we get there, can you just help the listeners and the community like understand first, like a 5-year-old can understand in a couple sentences, what is Tapioca DAO? And then right afterwards, can we go into like a little bit behind the curtain and help us understand why is Tapioca DAO special?
Yeah, so to kind of simply put it, Tapioca DAO is an omni-chain money market. So basically the core components of Tapioca are USDO, which is an omni-chain, over-collateralized, censorship-resistant stablecoin, and then basically borrow lend markets that include USDO. So basically, it's a whole ecosystem around the USDO stablecoin. And that's kind of the 5,000-foot view, so to speak, of what Tapioca is. I would also say kind of what makes it special is basically that it is the first cross-chain money market that is native to EVMs. So, you're not, like a Cosmos chain or like a IBC network or something like that, or relying on like an Axelar or something like that. Fully EVM native cross-chain interactions with lending and borrowing. So that's kind of the core concept of what Tapioca is.
And so when you say that the core concept is that like it's really cross-chain and interoperable, like what does that mean conceptually and what does that mean from like a design standpoint? And I guess like at the very basic level, like where's like home base for Tapioca DAO, or does that kind of concept go out the window?
No, so a very good question. So Tapioca at a design level and kind of home base level, it's a hub and spoke model. So basically the hub is Arbitrum, and then all of the other chains act as spokes in that system. So, to an end user, though, you would actually never know that Tapioca is the contracts are only native to Arbitrum. Like we actually don't have any contracts on any of the other chains we support outside of what are called proxies, which are, you could think of them like mailboxes. So if you use like Avalanche, you're dropping a letter in the mailbox and then it gets shipped off to Arbitrum, and that's how everything works. So it's a hub and spoke model. So you're thinking Tapioca contracts deployed in the center on Arbitrum, and then Avalanche, Polygon, BNB chain, Optimism, Ethereum mainnet, all those are spokes off from that. And obviously Arbitrum being a layer 2 roll up, you get really great throughput, really cheap fees, and it's great for this type of system that you're not bogged down by like a layer 1's fees or high latency or something like that when you're trying to commit cross-chain interactions. From a kind of like what this does for an end user. So obviously we know liquidity in DeFi is heavily fractured. We have 100 plus chains now. It's not like 2020 where ETH was 90% dominant. Like now we're seeing layer 2s pop up every day. We have zero knowledge rollups coming out, everything like that. So it creates more and more fragmentation on that liquidity, and obviously fragmentation leads to capital inefficiency, which means lower yields, harder UX problems, like basically accessing your liquidity and stuff. The average user, we actually did a little survey. Average user we found out of like about 3,000 people polled are using more than 3 chains a month. So people are definitely spread out now. And basically what Tapioca allows you to do is access all of your liquidity, no matter what chain it's on, in one application. You don't need a bridge anymore, nothing. So you can borrow and lend between chains. And then USDO itself as a stable coin is an OFT, layer 0 OFT. And what an OFT is an omni-chain fungible token. What that means is, so if you mint USDO in the CDP on, let's say, Arbitrum, you can mint and burn it to any chain. No fees, happens in about 20 seconds. So you can mint and burn it to Optimism, Avalanche, Polygon, wherever, SWE, wherever you want, even non-EVMs. So that's kind of
so just to hover over this point for a moment. So it sounds like, or correct me if I'm wrong, but the underlying technology here that allows Tapioca to coordinate between all these different chains is layer 0. And what Tapioca is doing is, like, on top of this, what we all hope is a very robust messaging system in layer 0. What Tapioca is doing is saying, okay, like, we are going to take, generic infrastructure and build, like, the first, cross-chain product. And what that is like this two-sided product where one side is like the lending and borrowing, and the other side is the stablecoin generation. Is that approximately right?
Exactly correct, actually. Yeah. So, again, you said it perfectly. Layer 0 is just a generalized messaging protocol. So it's, whatever you want to do with it. A lot of people misconceive, like, Stargate as layer 0. Stargate is actually just a protocol built on the layer 0 messaging protocol. Like Tapioca, we don't use Stargate whatsoever. We're actually only using layer 0 message passing. We have our own relayer called Pearl Layer. And we can get more into that, but basically, yeah, exactly correct. It's basically.
So do you consider, like, when you think of layer 0, like, how do you think about it holistically? Do you think about it as, like, this kind of new category of things, like a generic messaging platform? Do you think about it like a bridge, or do you think about it like almost in this, like, I'm starting to see, like, maybe even Tapioca, or maybe layer 0, or maybe the combination to be, like, kind of its own chain, if you will, even though it doesn't have the same, like, pieces that make a chain today. But I guess I'm like tangenting here in every direction. But when you look at layer 0, like, how do you understand holistically what that project and that platform is?
No, again, I actually think you pretty much summed it up as how my thoughts are. Layer 0 is really more like Ethereum than it is a bridge. And by that, I mean, you can build whatever you want with their generalized messaging system. Like, you can do anything with this. So it's really what you build on it is what matters. Layer 0 itself is just opening the door for the ability for stuff like Tapioca to be built. So yeah, I kind of look at it as like a framework in a toolbox, so to speak, so that we can kind of open the door to native interoperability that's not based on intermediaries and stuff like that, like Wormhole and things that we've seen get hacked in the past.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that layer 0 is, like, damn, lost my train of thought here, but I think well, totally lost my train of thought. So, okay, we have, Garrett. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and bail you out for a second with another question. So, like, obviously, like, bridge hacks is, like, one of the, like, most dangerous places in DeFi. So, like, even relying on layer 0 and keeping, like, stuff minimal, like, I imagine there's going to be, like, some concerns from people, which is just natural. Like, what kind of, like, extra precautions are you taking, given that you're kind of building on this omni-chain world and it could be considered more perilous?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's quite ironic. One of the things we started off with was, like, shared security is no security, which L2Beats took the exact opposite and said isolated security is no security. And really what we did with layer 0 and why we went with that is, again, there's no intermediary to worry about. And it's basically a two-party system in that an oracle and a relayer have to agree with one another. And actually, layer 0 even took that further with what's called precrime. Stargate currently uses precrime and will be the second to use it. Basically, what it is it's basically a set of rules or assertions that your protocol is making, that if any of those rules are broken in a message, the message fails out. So if, say, like we set a rule that, you can't take more liquidity out than you put in, if someone broke that rule, it would fail out of precrime and the message would fail. So there's that extra step of security on it. And also it's really cool. And then we're also using Chainlink as an oracle. So that basically allows us we have our own relayer, and then there's Chainlink. Those two parties have to agree, and then it has to pass what I was just talking about with precrime.
So I think I think there's like some interesting computer science like conversations to have about how like would you say like pre what?
Precrime.
Oh, pre-cron. Yeah. So exactly, right? Like what that's letting you do is like, hey, this is a generic, like general purpose messaging system, but like we are allowing you, the application developers, to put like basically like try catch blocks around like whatever's coming out. And if like you can identify errors in the application layer, like layer 0 is offering you the ability to like enforce that at the messaging level, which is cool. And I think kind of last thing I'll say about layer 0 before we go, like pivot right back like to Tapioca, but it's what's really cool to me in the way that you're describing this is that it allows like the Tapioca folks to like really focus on building financial products and building like the best designs around like stable coins and money markets, and not have to worry at all about like the information networking that like needs to happen but is not core to your business. And like part of me is like starting to think of like, this is like way too meta, but like is layer 0 the internet of Ethereum or the internet of blockchains, in that it's like this like kind of like infinitely plug and play like interface in order to connect like any chain to any chain. And so yeah, I mean, any final like thoughts and reflections on layer 0 before we pivot back to what Tapioca is actually doing?
No, I honestly, again, hit it on the head. I mean, what I always say about layer 0 is the key component is the customizability. Like you can do anything with this. You can change out Oracle sets. You can change out messaging libraries. You can the configurations that you can deploy are endless. So it's exactly what you said. It's almost like an internet layer between every blockchain in existence that can be used for whatever purpose you want. So definitely. Perfectly put.
Yeah. No, very cool. And a very, again, I think bear markets are for builders. And like part of what that means, like part of the reason that is because like we have new platforms and like there's just time to like for you guys to build things like Tapioca on top of it. So speaking of, so on that note, right, we have a money market, and like for folks out there, that essentially means you can deposit collateral and borrow capital out. And then you have the cross-chain native stablecoin, which is USD 0. Can you help us understand like how these two products together will look like all of the products that exist in the market today? For example, like an Aave, and how things will look very different.
Yeah, no. So USDO, basically the idea here is when you mint a new stable coin, like when you have a new CDP stable coin, the whole purpose of DeFi and everything is yield. You need to have an ability to gain yields on that stable coin. And one of the ideas I subscribed to really early on was Sam Kazemian's idea about like a trinity, where like a swap, lend, borrow market, and a stable coin is like the perfect kind of ecosystem. And when we were building Tapioca, we very upfront decided we wanted to have lend, borrow markets immediately. And now you're seeing Maker with Spark do that. Aave kind of go in reverse and do Go, so that they have a lend, borrow market and a stablecoin that are complementing each other. I would say how Tapioca differs is we're not based on Aave code and compound code, which is basically 99% of the market is all based on the same code bases. There's very little outside, like Euler is about all I can think of. Tapioca is actually based on Bento Box V2, which we built with Boring Crypto and Cashy. So I never think I think Cashy never really got a chance to blossom. Like Sushi kind of just left it permissionless, didn't do much with it. And besides that, you have Abracadabra, which just did the mint side with it. But Kashi is very powerful in that it's all isolated risk markets, so you're not having to share risk with all these different assets. So you can go a lot more exotic, like with like GLP markets, yield bearing collateral, stuff like that, to gain yields on, which makes it an attractive market for leverage and things like that with the stablecoin involved. And Bento Box V2 is just basically an updated version of Bento Box, of course, that supports rebase tokens, NFTs, and also has a lot of gas optimizations and stuff like that. And the biggest thing with it, though, is that it supports isolated strategies as well. So like Bento Box used to be one token with many strategies. Bento Box V2 is one token, one strategy. So you can have a lot more kind of mix up on the strategy side of things to do a lot more exotic strategies as well with your assets. So it offers a lot of composability, like omni-chain yield strategies, all different types of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, let me drag us right back to the layer zero conversation, or more specifically to the architecture conversation, because can you just help me understand how this actually works? Like, is there a smart contract that's running Kashi or Bento V2 on each EVM, and it's layer zero that's coordinating to make sure that each of the smart contracts share the same state? Is that kind of how this works?
So just to explain it, basically the only contract that's found on every chain is Bento Box V2, which is holding the collateral assets, and then applying them to whatever yield strategies that are intended to be applied. Basically, if you were to borrow with an asset that's not on Arbitrum, basically what would occur is, like, let's say AVAX. Basically AVAX would be deposited into Bento Box on Avalanche. A T AVAX wrapper would be minted. That's 1-to-1 against your your collateral. That receipt would then be on Arbitrum. And that's what's actually collateralizing your loan. And that's how there's this hub and spoke model. So when you liquidate, you're actually only liquidating on Arbitrum again. And when you actually would liquidate that TAVAX collateral, you get the TAVAX receipt token, which is an NFT. You burn the NFT, and then you're able to immediately withdraw the AVAX token out of Bento Box on Avalanche. So that's how that whole hub and spoke model actually works. All the infrastructure's on Arbitrum outside of Bento Box, which is just basically like a cash register for Tapioca. Like all of the collateral assets are held there on whatever chain.
Yeah, and what happens, like, let's say if I'm on Avalanche and I have like USDC and I want to deposit that into Tapioca and then go borrow USD zero on Optimism. Like, how does that work in terms of the USDC?
So USDC is actually not supported for USDO just because it's a censorship resistant stablecoin, so it's not backed by USDC. But there can be USDC yield strategies in our lend borrow markets, where basically we're not backing the stablecoin with it. It's an isolated lend borrow market, so there has to be people lending.
Is like wrapped BTC going to be supported?
No.
Okay, I'm just trying to think. Is there anything that could credibly exist on Avalanche and that you would need to migrate the liquidity over to the Arbitrum contract on the back end?
So for Avalanche, for example, the two assets we're supporting to mint USDO are AVAX and then Benkey staked AVAX, which is like a LSD for AVAX. So those are the only two assets that are supported for minting USDO. Now for yield strategies, we have GLP on Avalanche that's supported in Singularity as well, which is our lend borrow market. So basically you'll be able to lend and borrow with either Arbitrum GLP or Avalanche GLP, whichever you'd want.
And so when you're borrowing, let's say you're borrowing your USD, is that your USD to use freely, or are you locked into specific yield strategies that have been pre-vetted by Tapioca?
No, so if you just straight up borrow, the USDO is yours. Do whatever you want with it. If you lever it up, then of course that USDO is then applied back to the collateral, of course. But yeah, it's just yours.
Yeah. So the reason you might be interested in using the Tapioca yield strategies is because you guys, like, in theory, should be able to find better yield strategies because you have this like cross-chain insight and opportunity. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, we can go, like for example with ETH, we can apply ETH collateral to 3 different chains, gain yields on them from 3 different chains, and then actually find whatever the best yield is within a basket of yield strategies. And that's all managed by Layer 0 and Gelato Network for the automation side of things.
Got it. And so how do you move Ethereum cross network? Do you essentially like leverage Layer 0 and some sort of bridge protocol on top of it to like move the collateral?
Yep. So for rebalancing, that actually is the one thing we use Stargate for, is making sure there's sufficient liquidity on each chain. Or if we're rebalancing to a yield strategy on a different chain, then Stargate would be employed to actually get it over there and apply it.
So speaking of that kind of activity, if you're in DeFi and you're talking stablecoins, like, you need to be thinking peg support. And so can you talk a little bit about like how you guys think about how the market forces batter the peg, and what processes or incentives or whatever you're doing to mitigate that USD will have? Sorry, that was terrible sentence structure, but
no, I got you. It's all good. So first off, this is why we engage Chaos Labs for risk management on USDO. There's actually going to be a risk dashboard for it. And that's the same as like Aave has with Go right now. And basically, but for peg wise, USDO is a straight CDP stablecoin. So it uses arbitrage mechanics with USDO being hard pegged to $1 on the protocol. And basically, one of the things I think is really creative with us is how we are not actually, using incentives to gain LP for USDO. We're actually providing protocol owned liquidity for LP for USDO. So it protects it from bank runs and things like that. And that's actually done through our call option incentives. So when people, exercise their OTAP call options, that's giving the DAO protocol owned liquidity, which we can then supply to LP for USDO cross chains, which is really a really beneficial system. Like I said, you don't have to worry about bank runs, incentives to keep the LP there, everything like that. So
yeah, so I thank you for bringing it up, because I didn't know if that was something like that we were allowed to talk about. But since you brought it up, the option system, I think, is like really, really worth our time to, like, talk about and understand a little bit, because I think, this kind of narrative or conversation has died down, like, really in the wake of Luna. But if you remember before that, like, all we could talk about was like mercenary liquidity and protocol owned liquidity. And like that, that's essentially what created the Olympus ohm fork season, right? Was just this like real belief that we need to come up with new innovations to solve this. So can you talk about, any like interesting insights that you had in designing this system, and then ultimately like what you came up with?
Yeah, so a lot of people found out about us through my RIP liquidity mining article back in like October, which kind of described the whole concept of using call options as incentives, and then what issues we saw with it and the fixes we had on it. Basically, to go back a little bit, Keeper Network had done O&R Keeper back in 2021. Then really no one ever did again. Andre went on to do Solidly, and nobody ever talked about call option incentive again. When we were looking at what an incentive model was, and I just kind of went down a rabbit hole and researching, profitability of DAOs, and how I was looking at things was basically like, your profitability should be looked at as your expenditure and emissions against your revenues and your treasury, instead of like looking at like a TVL metric or something like that. Also, Olympus was another major inspiration in that gathering capital should be the number one driver for an incentive program. And with liquidity mining, you're kind of playing a negative sum game where you're just putting out emissions, hoping mercenary liquidity captures it, and then somehow hoping that incentive retains value, which is almost impossible, and somehow making a net profit out of your expenditures and emissions, which has never been done. There's actually I actually did like I found a graph anyway from Bankless that showed like every popular protocol's deep negatives in profitability if you look at their expenditures and emissions. So when I was looking at call options, basically we could use the call options to generate protocol and liquidity. So we're both incentivizing people to mint and lock USDO into our lend borrow markets with call options, in the money call options, which are very lucrative to get because they bear inherent profit. And then when people exercise them, our DAO is generating massive amounts of protocol owned liquidity, which we can then use for our stablecoin and then other purposes in the future. So I kind of looked at this as a way to capture capital like Olympus did, but do it in a lot more sustainable fashion and end up in an area where we're done with inflation, just because I have an opinion that inflation shouldn't go forever. Like there should be an end goal of your incentive program. Mm-hmm. And the end goal is to bootstrap the largest treasury that's ever been built on chain and use that so that USDO is basically so profitable that the system is extremely attractive to get involved with. And that's kind of the whole basis for OTAP and the DAO share options program.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely I agree with you on like all the first principles, and I definitely agree that I'm just excited to see innovation in this space. And so I guess like, can you just like kind of unpack the program a little bit more and talk about first like how might you earn these options, and then can you describe the result of these being options in like both a bull market and a bear market? Like how does that change the dynamic to be like more healthy for Tapioca?
No, great question. So firstly, the incentive for what OTAP is incentivizing is people to lock USDO into singularity markets. And those are our lend borrow markets. And the reason we want to do that is when people mint USDO or swap for USDO, we're getting fees off that. And then when they lend it, we're attracting borrowers that may want to take out leverage. So we're getting more fees on that. So basically by incentivizing the lockup, we're incentivizing 3 different forms of profit from different fees and things like that. And basically we looked at the way to incentivize lockup longer and longer was through the pricing of the options. And that's what Keeper missed. And what a lot of people with options miss is if you just do a flat discount, it's just liquidity mining with more steps. When you can dynamically price the option against what the value of time is, which is what our TWAML system is, that's where we get into something I think is special, where we're incentivizing a PvP system where, like, if I lock for a year, I may get a 50% discount, but if you go after me to lock the same amount in the same amount of time, you'll get a 25% discount. So now you either have to double your lock or accept a smaller discount, and so on and so forth. And then until someone stops locking, that's when the system will start decaying back down to the basis so that you could lock again for a year and get that 50% discount. So it's like almost like a dynamically modulating vote escrowing model.
Yeah.
Because I always thought vote escrowing, like a 4-year lock is great in a bull run, but in a bear market, it may not be as attractive to lock for 4 years. So if it could dynamically modulate, the whole point of the system should be to get as much lockup as possible, by any means necessary. And the free market with allocative efficiency is the best at deciding that. But moving back to kind of what'll kind of happen and things like that is basically with OTAP, being redeemed and that USDO growing, the fees are going to grow, and then it's more attractive to buy and lock tap because then you get access to all of those fees. You get a share of those fees in the form of ETH every week paid out to you. So it basically, and then as those fees grow, it's kind of like a flywheel effect where the more and more those fees grow, the higher the price of Tap should be, because the higher the amount of yield you can get by owning Tap. And therefore, the higher the price of Tap is, the more money we make off the options in the protocol and liquidity. And then that just keeps growing and growing and growing, especially when Tap is a fixed supply. So you start getting supply shock where the inflation's decaying and the price is theoretically rising from, more and more fees and yield. So therefore, the DAO is getting more and more protocol and liquidity to sustain itself. And that's kind of the whole goal is throughout this inflation program, which there's some other stuff there, but nonetheless, basically the goal is, like I said, just to bootstrap the biggest treasury ever built on chain, and then basically get tons of yield on it. And kind of share that with DAO shareholders, which are TW Tap lockers.
Yeah, I there's like kind of a lot to unpack there. I think first, so like what is like the option thing is super cool. I think that like once you like take away all of the jargon, a lot of it looks pretty similar to the Olympus bond program, I think.
Yeah.
Except for like the concept with options is that it's asymmetric, right? Whereas like if the price is moving up for call options, let's say, if the price is moving up, then like you can make more and more and more money. But if the price is moving down, like you have a fixed stop, and like your option will expire worthless, and so all the money that you can lose is whatever you paid for the option. And
the big thing I think with bonding real quick is bonding is like a coupon off, where it's you have a 20% off coupon. So it doesn't matter if Ohm is $10, $100, $1,000, it's 20% off. Whereas with options with a strike price, it's a lot more sustainable as it creates a natural price floor, because if your strike is $2 and also with them expiring, you're creating a natural price floor the entire time so that you can mitigate the amount of sell pressure, whereas bonding just can be infinite sell pressure. It can be even more sell pressure than liquidity mining in certain cases. So that's where I think a call option
can you walk me through that like a little bit? So in the case where the price of whatever, like we don't have to pick on Tapioca, right? Like the price of your asset is falling and you have a call option. And once it falls out of the money, how does your call option still, so like it seems to me that like what this structure is offering is like really impressive upside on the swing up, and then what the protocol is essentially saying is like on the swing down, we are going to withdraw a lot of like the economic firepower that we're putting out there. And I don't mean that as criticism or anything, but I guess how do you respond to that characterization?
No, it's 100% correct. And that's the point of why the expiries are set at a week, because that small of a time frame allows us to generate new strike prices pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there could be a case, and obviously where in that week time frame that the strike prices go out of the money on the options. And at that point, they're just not going to be exercised, and they're going to expire. And with the lockup, basically every week you're locked, you get a new allocation of OTAP. So like if you're locked 52 weeks, you get 52 allocations of OTAP. Mm-hmm. And basically, so you do have like the next week to look forward to that. And there is an issue there that we're going to resolve with our first ecosystem application against Tapioca, which is it will get very annoying to have to manually exercise OTAP every week. So basically we're going to have strategies to automate that with flash borrowing and basically settling them for you.
Yeah. As an American, please, can you do that in one transaction?
Yeah, well, no, it will be. Yeah, I mean, it's so there definitely is the case there, but that's also where we looked at another system, which is a reverse LBP as a mechanism to have a floor price, so we can defend our where the options like floor price should be via a reverse LBP running, where basically if TAP started dropping to that price, then people could sell it in against the reverse LBP, and essentially instead of to the market. So then you're not getting sell pressure to bring it below the strike. But that's something obviously you have to be careful with, or you're in like infinite buyback programs, which I think are hugely negative. So it's a careful harmony. But I think with fee generation, with protocol and liquidity growing, things like that, you're able to have, basically with the more and more liquidity you have the more granular you can get in your approaches to defend your entire system. So
okay, so yeah, how do I explain this to my parents so we can get crypto to hit mainstream everyday adoption, right?
Well, I mean, so Tapioca is definitely there's kind of two sides to it. There definitely is a power user side of it that you can get real into the nitty gritty with, like TWAML and DAO share options and all this type of stuff. But on the face of it, and if like you check out our beta and stuff, I think we have one of the most simple to use applications ever. Like my mom and my co-founder's mom actually were the beta testers at the beginning. But basically, we wanted to make this a system where you don't need to know all the stuff. It's just like Curve. Like if I want to go to Curve and do a swap, I don't need to know VECRV. I don't need to know the stable swap invariant and all this type of stuff. With Tapioca, if you just want to, go to Tapioca, borrow against your liquidity, it's very simple to do. If you want to, leverage trade, you can do that.
Yeah.
So it's made to have kind of two different, kind of sides to it.
No, man, I think it's even more than that, right? Because like just hovering on Curve for a second, right? It's even more that like if you want to use Curve, you don't need to worry about VECRV or stable swap or like any of this stuff. Like we're now at the point where if you want to use Curve, you don't even have to know what Curve is, because you're probably using aggregator in which like, and so like I am just we talk all the time about like how are we going to get like Go in like the mainstream so that like grandma is like keeping her savings in like these stable coins that we're printing. And like I'm just such a huge believer that we're building like layers of technology that humans won't deal with. And like I could totally imagine a world where Tapioca does like create the largest treasury and USD0 is the largest stable coin, and nobody who's not a deep systems engineer has ever heard of it before. In the same way
that's very true.
We all share information all the time, but guess what? Like not one of us ever thinks about like the construction of a TDP packet, right? But we use it every single, like we're using trillions right now just in this stream. And so like, I think
too, on that point, one of the concepts that I initially wanted to do was USDO as a stable coin for the masses, that you have a stable coin like a 2019 DAI where it's not called DAI, it's actually called USD, so people know what it is, and then people can trade it, and then they just go, okay, this is a decentralized stablecoin, but they're actually getting a real decentralized stablecoin that's not backed by USDC and RWAs that are from God knows where. You're with a stablecoin that's backed by gas tokens. It's called USDO. And it's basically like, hey, I'm hedging against a Circle or a Tether, or something like that, and I'm holding the stablecoin because I know it has more money in than out. And I know this is risk managed by Chaos Labs, and I know I can hold this stable coin and it'll remain stable. And that's one of the big things is I really like, I always talk about the first thing I'm looking at with Tapioca and analytics wise is L2 dominance versus DAI, because it's one of the things that I want to do is become more so than the next like money market stable like a MIM or LUSD or something like that. My targets are more on a DAI and like a mass adopted mainstream decentralized stablecoin. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, we got like 5-ish more minutes to go here, so let us pivot from like all the cool things that you're working on into like the cool news that you guys have in front of us. So I know there's two things. I know you have a very big announcement that is accompanied by some of the coolest art by my favorite artists. And kind of a forward-looking announcement for the rest of this week. So, Matt, TW Matt, would you share with the audience what's going on with Tapioca? Yeah, no. So, I'm obviously many people know we closed our seed round. I'm really happy about that. When we started this thing raising wise, we started right after the FTX collapse. A lot of people told me it'd be impossible. And we made this even harder for ourselves. We were like, we want really great angels and stuff like that to be involved with us. And somehow we hit the nail on the head. I'm really happy with who we have involved with us and helping us get to that next step, and not just the money itself. And it was a big effort from a lot of different people, and I'm just really glad that that's not done with, but that we can look forward, as you said. And looking forward, speaking of, we have our final beta coming out tomorrow, right before our weekly podcast, which is called Tap Talk. And basically, going forward, I have also another big announcement that a lot of people have been hanging on me on. So we completed our first audit with Certora. Our second audit is about to be officially scheduled for July 1st, which is with Code Arena. We're going to have a $400,000 contest, a 21-day contest. So it's quite a little bit longer for how big this freaking code base is at this point. It's 10,000 lines of code, so it's pretty thick. But yeah, we're getting that scheduled, and I'm just really excited for people to see the final form of Tapioca and get to know it before we get to like LBPs and all that good stuff and mainnet launch, which will be a really big event. I mean, we've been developing this thing since February of 2022, so it's been a long run here. But I'm just happy to see it's coming to fruition, all this hard work.
Yeah, man, I was about to say happy birthday, but time isn't moving in crypto speeds right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're way smarter than me, so you shouldn't take advice from from someone who's not so smart. But instead of calling it Tap Talk, you should call it What's on Tap.
Oh, that's a good one. That I actually like that. I'm gonna have to make that a weekly segment on Tap Talk. What's on Tap? That's a good one. No,
as long as it works this way.
The tap memes are great. Tapped out, tapping in, what's on tap. It could go forever. That's why I love food coins. I was a big yams guy, sushi guy, and all that. Gelato. So that's why the name's Tapioca. But nonetheless, yeah, food coins are great.
Yeah, man, awesome. Well, I cannot thank you enough for spending this time with us and sharing with us. And there's so many more things we need to talk to you about, and we got to have you back because I want to talk about why it's so important to have this decentralized stable and why you're being so particular about the collateral. And I want to talk about what new types of yield opportunities open up when you are cross-chain focused. And I want to talk to you about what it's like to raise money post FTX and this, I can hear from your accent that you're American. So, in this environment as well. So, and that's like even really before we touch like the true math or finance of what you're doing. So Matt, just thank you so much. Would you please share where the audience can find both you and Tapioca?
Yeah, no, just real quick. Thank you so much for having me on. I really, big time respect to both of you guys. Obviously, like I said, I've been following you guys for a while, and shout out everybody who's watching. But yeah, you can follow me at Twmattt with 3 T's, and you can follow Tapioca at Tapioca_DAO on Twitter, and you can always check us out in Discord. I'm always there. But yeah, no, this has been an absolute pleasure. Really fun time on this.
Well, good, man. You keep making news so that you can break it with us.
Absolutely. We'll do. But thanks. I do look forward. We could do another one. And it's been an absolute pleasure again.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, man. And to all you squids out there, have a good rest of your day. And we'll be back at you tomorrow.
Cheers, everyone.